Hello everyone, this is Mike and welcome back to the Chassis Tech channel. This is going to be part two of an HTML reporting series that I'm recording here. So using HTML reporting with PowerShell, and in this one we're going to look at using cascading style sheets. So this is going to be building on the previous video, the last one I just recorded, where we put together a basic HTML report. Wasn't the most exciting looking report in the world, but at least was the guts of a report with multiple pieces of output captured in it. So we used the fragment part, the fragment parameter with convert to HTML, and then finally spit out a final HTML document to go with it. So here we're going to carry on with that, do a little more work to the report, and one of the things we're going to do is add a style sheet into there to make the report look a little more palatable. Let's put it that way. Okay, so with that, let me switch back over to where we left off. So I'm going to go look at my client 2 VM here, or my client 1 VM, I should say. And the script in question here was where we left off last. Right, so pretty basic, where we grab some information from Active Directory, grabbed information about a user, grabbed specific properties, made a couple of our own properties uh, based on what was there, kicked it out as an HTML fragment using convert to HTML with the fragment parameter. So we did a list there, we did a table, we did another table, and then finally combined those together and then had our path here where we were saving the HTML output. All right. Now, a couple things though that I might want to incorporate with this. Oh, and before I do that, let's just show again, here was the HTML that we had. Again, not the most, fancy HTML in the world, but it is at least something, right? All right, so we definitely want to improve upon that. So one of the ways that I probably want to improve on it is I probably want to add like a header up top here, and I probably want to add like a footer down at the bottom. So the header could be like, report for user something, and maybe the footer could be like the date or something like that. Okay, so can I incorporate that into here? Absolutely. So if we look at the convert, let me pull up help on convert to HTML, and you'll notice in here that in the parameter sets, you see, where is it here? There's post content right there. That could be good for adding a footer, and pre content, which would be good for adding a header. And they both take string objects. So take string, and this right here means it takes multiple. So you could feed multiple string objects into each one of those. Okay, so I could potentially use something like that with my report here. So this is the first fragment that's being produced. So before I kick out the string here, where I do the out string, I could put in here the pre-content line here, and maybe in HTML talk, we want to make a header. So that would be, we maybe do an H1 header. That's the biggest one. And inside of it, let's do report for, and let's use the variable $user. All right, and then we'll close that. Okay, like so. So we kind of add that piece in. Okay. Now then for the footer, this is the last fragment. So what I could do in here is again use a parameter. Let's do in this case post content. And then inside of there, let's maybe not make that an H1. Let's maybe make that smaller of a header. So maybe like, I don't know, how about like an H5? Let's try that. And then what I want to do is just grab the date, right? So let's maybe just use the output, which I'll use as a sub expression. Just grab the output from get date, something like that, and then we'll close the H5 header. Oh, that's not closing it, that's opening it. There we go. And so we could put those pieces in and see what that does to our report here. So we'll go ahead and save it. And then let me go ahead and run this. So let me change my directory over to C:stuff. And I don't remember what the name of my script was. Okay, user report. So user report, and in this case, the user was Jeff Kent. Oh, and I did not give it an output path. So let's see. So let's do HTML file name. Let's call it test4.html. Kind of forgot that parameter. Okay. So now there's our test4. I crack it open, and then there's the header. So that's basically the pre-content for this table right here. I know it doesn't look like a table, but it is. And then we've got the post content right there. All right, so that is the date and time that I am recording this video. Okay, so that's cool. You could also maybe put a little more into that if we wanted to. So maybe something like report created on, and then have the date. So that's cool. So I'll go with that. All right. So now that's everything, let's say, that I want to do on the report. So let me go ahead and run that one more time. And yeah, I'll just overwrite the one that's there. So that's everything I want to do except for styling it, right? Because this is obviously looking a little bland, a little plain. So we want to do a little bit of enhancement to this. Okay, so that means you're going to need a cascading style sheet. And so cascading style sheets, let me apologize up front. If anybody is a web developer, you're probably going to be laughing at me for the next like 10, 15 minutes here. So I am not a web developer. I know enough about this to basically create a report that doesn't look horrible. Right? So it's certainly not going to be perfect, but it is at least something. Right? So it's, can't always make everything fancy, but it could be enough to potentially get you by. And that's what I want to impart on to everyone else here. Enough to make a decent looking report so you could utilize this maybe in your business workflow or something like that. Okay? So that represents the guts of the report. And if I open this instead of in like Edge, if I were to open this with like Notepad, I could literally see the raw HTML. Right? So you can see, there's the first table it put together. There's the report, or there's the title there. Um, Not the title, my header. I apologize. It did throw a title there at me. Let's see. So we've got the second table, we've got the third table, and then lastly, there's the the post content with a lot smaller of a header there. Right? And then you could see likewise the opening HTML element, the closing HTML element right there, closing of the body. There was the opening body element right there, and everything kind of contained within that. So there's the opening table, closing of the table, opening another table, closing the table, opening the last table, and so on. Okay, so you have all of these HTML elements embedded in there. So some people might refer to them tags, but in like, I'm more familiar with XML. So in the XML world, they're definitely referred to as elements. So you can create an element, you can remove an element, you can modify an element, and so on. And in this case, like where you see text like this is what we usually refer to as inline text, INLINE, inline text. for these particular elements. Right? So I want to fancy this up. Now, if you have an idea already of what you want to do, like if you had a cascading style sheet, you could go ahead and apply it at this point. Okay, and for some people that might be enough, right? So I found a cascading style sheet on the web somewhere, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it in. So you could totally do that and be perfectly fine with it. But let's say we want to kind of learn a bit, or, around the journey here. So let's say I'm not quite sure what I want to do, and I'd like to kind of style it on the fly. So what you could do, again, this is not the way I recommend, but what you could do is you could come in here, put your cascading style sheet info inside of the script here, and then every time you make a subtle change to it, rerun the script, and then basically look at the file, open up the report again, and so on. So you could do that, but it's kind of a bit cumbersome. So I like to use an online cascading style sheet viewer that you can kind of use here. Not really a viewer, more like an emulator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the HTML code and I'm going to highlight it, Control A, and I'm going to do a Control C. And now I'm going to move over to my desktop of my real computer here. So this is running with the VM. What you're seeing here is a Hyper-V VM. It does not have internet access. So I'm going to move over to my desktop. And on my desktop, I have open a website, w3schools.com. All right, so if we kind of look at it here, www.w3schools.com. Right? Now, on that, if you go to tutorials, click on that, and you go down to Learn CSS, that opens up their basically program here of learning cascading style sheets. Right. And I'm going to be going, excuse me, I'm going to be going through some of this because it's a good reference to learn where the different attributes are that go with doing a report. Okay, doing a cascading style sheet. So you're basically putting in a bunch of different properties, bunch of different attributes into a CSS type of format and using that to apply to your HTML page here, which happens to be your report. So at this beginning page here, and again, if you don't remember how I got here, I went to tutorials and learn CSS. So that gets you to this kind of start page right here. And then if you scroll down, you see there's like an example, and then you see like this try it yourself button. And if you click that, that opens up this emulator that I am going to use. Okay, so let me, first of all, let me take my browser here and just kind of zoom it up a little bit so you can see the text over on this side a little easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the text that's there. I don't want to use any of that. I'm going to paste my own text in. So this is the report minus the cascading style sheet info. And if I click run, notice it actually spits out my report on the right. Okay, and it's totally boring glory, if you will. Okay, so now I could go ahead and add in the cascading style sheet info to basically like play around with what I can make this look like. Okay, how nice can I make this look? Okay, so the cascading style sheet itself goes into the head section here. So there's the opening head element, there's the closing head, and then somewhere in here you're going to put in your cascading style sheet, which has its own section. So if I hit enter and I put in style and then close style, you have just made yourself, let's put a couple spaces in here now, you have just made yourself the section for the cascading style sheet. Okay, and now we need some stuff to be able to put in there. So if I go back to the tutorial page here, you could see that there's a lot of different elements that you can kind of work with here. So I'm going to be, mainly focused on like the table one right here. There's a list one. We can see padding, margins, borders, backgrounds, colors. So let's say first of all, I just click on the colors one. And with colors, you could go select like a background color. You could select colors for uh, your headers. You could do text color. Okay, so you have a bunch of different options that we could pursue here. Okay, so we could select a border color, color values. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that we could put in here. So if I kind of go, let's say to like RGB, which is the red, green, blue values. So these are basically looking at kind of like when you look at like a rainbow, right? You have all these different colors of the rainbow that represent different light frequencies. Well, in imaging, and this works with like photography, video, stuff like that, you have what are called different color spaces. And color spaces are basically mixtures of different colors. Almost think of it like you're mixing paint. So if you have different color spaces, they each have their own idea of what the base colors are. So in the RGB color space, you have red, green, and blue, and you have different values of them from 0 to 255. It's actually a 16-bit value, all right? I'm sorry, an 8-bit value. And you have different numbers of how much of each you want to mix together. Okay, so it is mixing light rather than paint. So if you do like a 0 on all of these, that basically means you have black. And if you do 255 of all of these, you basically have white. And then somewhere in the middle, you have a bunch of different types of colors that you could have here. So for instance, if I kind of put up an RGB mixer, if I do a search for that, there's a few different RGB color mixers out here where you could actually mix up your own color. So for instance, if I set red to 0, green to 0, and blue to 0, see how it makes black. Right? And if I turn the red all the way up, that's your red color. If I turn green all the way up, I get that green color, and if I turn both of these up, I get yellow. So that's what happens when you mix red and green together at full value. If I kind of roll that one down and roll blue up, that gets me magenta. If I roll up green, roll down red, that gets me cyan. So if you are familiar with, let's say, doing video or image retouching, I do a ton of image retouching in my personal life. These colors here, what you saw, the yellow, the magenta, and the cyan, they're actually the opposite of these. Okay, so for instance, red has the opposite of cyan, green has an opposite of magenta, and blue has the opposite of yellow. Right, so you can mix pretty much any color you feel like in here, provided you kind of, play around with it. Now, what is interesting to note, if all of these are equal, so I'm going to try to set all of them as close to 100 as I can here. If you set all of them to 100, it's always going to be some form of gray. Okay, so whether it's a lighter gray or whether it's a darker gray, that's what you're getting. Right, and if you want to make the gray more warm, you could kind of take away a little bit of the blue, and that kind of evens it, puts a little more greenish and a reddish tint into it. If you add a little blue, it kind of makes more of like a purplish, like a um, kind of like a cooler, type of color, if you will. So you could, again, mix the colors depending on what you want. Maybe I'll add a little more of that, take away a little blue, add some green, and you can make whatever color you feel like. Right? So that's a color mixer. Now we record these values in hexadecimal. So for a decimal number like 255, its hex value is FF, because this is an 8-bit value. With hex, you have two 4-bit values. Right? And with it here, you can see some of the different RGB colors that they have. And I gotta remember where they put this. There's a whole bunch of, yeah, right here, 140 standard color names. So if I open this up, this is almost like going to the hardware store where you have like a whole bunch of different color values that you could go with here, where you have those little, color sample things you could bring home and see if that matches what you want to use or whatever. Okay, so you can see that there's black, uh, azure, Alice blue, aqua, cadet blue, coral, corn silk, cyan, and it also gives you the hex value as well if you wanted to record it. Okay, so we can see like there's a dark gray, a dark khaki, a dark orange, a dark salmon, um, a regular gray, a gold, goldenrod, hot pink, ivory, and so on. Okay, so you have all of these colors to basically pick from. All right. So now let's say I want to use some type of background here. So we have color names. You can look at the colors that are there, and that might be where you want to start. Okay, so I could come down here into my elements and I can see background color, right? And so we could declare in a body section of our CSS style sheet, our cascading style sheet, we could select background color as a property. Okay, so if we come into our editor here, we could use, we're going to go off of the body section, and then we're going to open up a curly bracket like a script block, and then close it. Okay, and then inside of it, I can put different CSS properties into there, and the property I put in there will apply to any HTML elements that are in the body element. So for instance here, notice, everything I have is inside of that body element. Okay, so we're going to do background color and then colon and then whatever the value is. So with it here, and again, you could always read more about how to enter it. So you could see here if you want a valid color name, you could just put the color name there. Okay, like you see here, light blue. And if you want to put a hex value, you could just put a pound or a hashtag in front of it. And if you wanted to do the RGB, you could just use RGB parentheses and then the red, green, and blue numbers that you wanted to use. Okay, so let's say if I wanted my background to be, I don't know, what would be a color here? Maybe I want to do, I don't know, red, right? So let's run it and notice that's what it did to the style sheet. Okay, so the style sheet was now applied to my HTML document here. So that's kind of looks a little gaudy. I don't really like that. So maybe I want like a really light gray. Let's go with that. So I believe there is a color for that. I could do light gray and run that. Um, and if I don't necessarily like that, I could use the pound sign and do the hex values. Okay, so a light gray, that would be all F's would be white. Okay, like so. That's turning everything up to like 255, so that would be white. And if I wanted a little less than that, I could do maybe all E's. And now that gives me like a light gray. Okay, so maybe I'll go with that as the background color. Okay. Now, the next thing I might want to do is I might want to decide overall on a font that I want to use. Okay, so again, that would apply to the whole body element. Right? So in this case, that would basically be my document here. Right? So we could go and add that in. So if I come in here, we could go find that there is kind of like a font section here, and we could see some of the different font families that are available and what particular fonts live inside of them. Right? So I could see like there's Courier New, Lucida Console, Monaco as monospace fonts. Monospace is basically like each character uses the same amount of space. And I usually like to go with that when I'm making an HTML report. Your mileage may vary, but that's how I kind of like to do it with PowerShell stuff. But notice there's the serif family, there's the sans serif family. So Times New Roman and Arial are very popular fonts as well. They are not these width proportional fonts. So that means each character can use a different amount of space. Like if you notice the capital A uses a ton, this little I here barely uses any, right? So they're not all the same width. Whereas here, the C here and the I, they both use the exact same amount of space, right? So let's say I want to go with this. So if I put that into my style sheet, let's go back here, and we could use font family is the name of the property. Okay, and in fact, I'll just steal this whole line right here. Okay, so I want to steal that whole line, and I'm going to put that in here. Okay, now when you start putting in, that is not what I wanted to do. To put that right there. There we go. So when you start putting in multiple properties, you can lay them all out in like a big line. But what I kind of like to do is after each property, see that semicolon? You could put a carriage return after that. So I do a carriage return, and now, that doesn't belong there. And now I have these two pieces in here. And in fact, if you even wanted to, kind of like with script blocks in PowerShell, you could take and put them each on their own line and have the opening and closing of the body section kind of be on their own lines as well. So, and then maybe just tab those in, right? So now you might be thinking, well, why did you put three things? Well, what the cascading style sheet allows you to do is to declare a font family. So if Lucida console is there, that's the one it's going to use. If that's not there on whatever computer is generating the report, Courier New is going to be used. And if that's not there, it's going to find some font in the monospace family. Right? So basically, like you're giving yourself like fallbacks, if you will. Right? So, and if I go ahead and run this, you can see it now switched over to Lucida console, right? Which is present on this computer. Now, another thing I might want to do with font could be font size. And font size is again another property as well. So you see font size and then you give it a certain amount of pixels you want the font to be. Okay, so we could go put that in there. And again, after monospace, since I'm going to put another property in here, I could put in font size, colon, and then what size. So maybe I want to go with, let's try 10. 10, 10 pixels, something like that. Or I'm sorry, not, yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's go with that. Okay, now notice it didn't change the color of the property. And the reason for that is because on the previous one, I didn't end it with a semicolon. So the semicolon kind of tells it, okay, you're done with that property. So notice if I put a semicolon on the end, now it kind of color codes the next one correct, and we can run that, and away we go. So that's kind of a little small. So maybe we might want to try and do a 12. Bring that a little better. Maybe. Maybe go to 14. Okay, maybe I'll go with that. Right? And again, this is, you don't have to do what I do, right? This is, everybody can, how shall we say, can do their own thing, right? So that gets us a fairly simple start to our style sheet here, right? Now, the next few things I'm probably going to want to do are going to revolve around the tables. Okay, so this is a table, this is a table, and this is a table. Right? So you could see that by looking in the HTML code. So here's the opening table. There's all the name and department stuff. And just notice this. Why is that like that? Huh. I probably have a typo in my script somewhere. That should not be department. That should be department. So that's obviously a typo I've got somewhere. All right. So I'll fix that when we get back into the script in a little bit so everybody can just kind of hold with that for a moment. So that's the first table. Then we have the second table right here, and then the third table right here. Okay, with again the opening table element, the closing table element. Okay, now if I go back and look in my style sheet info here, see tables kind of show up, right? So I see tables, and there's a whole bunch of information we could do with tables themselves. So you have a table element or table properties that we could put in, TH, which stands for table header, and TD for table display. So again, if I go look at my HTML, see how there is a table header section, TH. So notice that one is nested group, so that matches this name over here. So that's the header for that table, the header row. And then you have table display for each of the individual rows. So I could do something to the whole table, I could do something to the table header, and I could do something to the table display. So we have those different sections available if we wanted to do that, right? So table, table header, table display. So when you see that here, table, table header, table display, listed out like this, that's basically saying I want to do this property like border to all of those things, right? So that could be again something you want to do to the entire uh, to the to the entire table. I don't family, if you will, the table itself, the table header, and the table display. So let's say first, I don't want to do borders here. Um, let's first of all maybe go and look at um, under the tables here. Uh, you know, you can see that there's some properties like the full width table. Okay, so the table above might seem small. If you need a table that should span the entire screen, add width and then some percentage there to the table element. So you see width and then some percentage. So I could go again in my style sheet. Let's come up here and I could go add a table element. And then inside of it, we'll use that width attribute and maybe we'll say, how about 90%, right? So it didn't seem to do a lot, but it did set the width of whatever kind of like the overall window is here. So it'll take whatever it is and be 90% less than that. So if you want to make sure the table uses up like the whole width of your screen. So we could also, let's go back in here and notice table size. We could set things like the width, which you just saw me do. We could also set like a height to a table. Right? We could also set, let's see here, alignment. So there's text alignment. We'll work with that one in a sec. And notice we got vertical align. And I'm looking for borders. There's a margin in here as well. I don't remember quite where it is. Maybe we'll look at size here. No, style, text align, horizontal, hoverable. All right, so there is in a table, there is a margin as well. I don't remember quite where it happens to be. I'm just remembering this from my own memory, where I might want to have the table, maybe I'll do like an 80% of the width. And then we'll add in, how about like a margin left of maybe like, how about 20 pixels. And then we'll throw a margin, a bottom of maybe like 20 pixels as well. So what that'll do is that'll apply to each table and it'll indent it from the left 20 pixels and it will add 20 pixels to the bottom. Okay, like so. And now what did that do? It gapped the tables from each other. So they kind of stand alone a little more. In fact, let me take the bottom one and just do a 40 just to make it a little more, right? So now the tables are nice and gapped. All right, so now I might want to start looking at let's say the table headers. Okay, so let's do something there. So we got the table itself, and now let's look at the table header, and we'll have a section open for that. Okay, so for first of all, let's maybe say I want to use, I could select a background color, right? So maybe I might want to do that. So let me steal background color here. And I don't necessarily want to do that. Um, let's do this just to show you what it does. Let's do all zeros, which would be black, and then see what that just did to the table headers. Okay, now just the sections that have headers. The first table does not have a header on it because in PowerShell I outputted it as a list. So list output, even though PowerShell makes a table on it, it doesn't put a header on it like a true table. Um, so so you can see again that background color applying to my my table header here. Now that's probably not what I want. So let me go back to let's go back to colors here. Let's go look at the standard color names and let's maybe try and find, you know what, how about this dark blue? Let me use that. All right, let's just do that. So color, dark blue. There we go. Okay, so that's first part of the header. Now, I might also, and not I might, I will also want to specify the text color. So in this case, the text color, I'll just go with white. And there we go. So I got a dark blue background and then a white for the text. Okay, so that's my header section. All right. So now let's work on the table display. Okay, so again, the individual rows are inside these table display elements. So see, there's an opening TD and a closing TD right there. And those are overall inside of a TR as well for table row. Okay, so you could um, put that in as well if you wanted to work with those specific things. Okay, so let's say on table display. So let's work with that. So let's throw a TD section in there. All right, so I got table display. And let's say the first thing I might want to do here is throw in a border. Okay, so that is, again, if we come up to our CSS kind of resource here, go to tables, you could see, like, for instance, table style, that there's, you could say like borders, border bottom, table borders. So you could just literally use a property called the border. And with the border, you can apply how big you want the border to be, whether it's solid, stranded, whatever kind of line you want it to be. And then you could also apply color if you wanted to as well. That could be a third value onto there. Okay, so if I wanted to go with that, I could use a border that I'm applying to my table display. So I'm not applying it to the whole table. I'm not applying it to the header. I'm applying it to the individual rows. So we'll do border of 1 pixel and let's do solid. So it should default to solid. Let's do black. Okay, so I go ahead and run that, and I'm getting nothing at the moment, which strikes me as I have a typo somewhere. Oh, yeah, right here. Okay, so I didn't do a closing curly bracket, I did a square bracket. So let me fix that. That's a typo. Okay, and there we go. So now that put borders around all of the rows that are inside of the table. Right? So I could see each of these things a little clearer here. Now, that to me, I mean, it looks okay. And again, if I wanted to, maybe I could do a white border. That doesn't show as well. How about a red border? Yeah, there we go. That's cooking with gas now. Okay, so I could do something like that. Now, to me though, this kind of looks like it looks a bit crummy, right? So if we go back here, let's see if I can find this um, table style. I'm looking for a specific property. Oh, full width. Yeah, right here. This border collapse. Now notice here, border collapse, it goes into the table element. So even though I made the border in a table header, this property goes in the table section itself. So not all attributes can go in all of the different sections. So up in table here, I'm going to go add another thing in. And again, remember, when you add another thing, you got to remember to put that semicolon on the end of the previous one here. And we're going to do the border collapse. And the mode we're going to give it is to collapse. All right. So notice what that's going to do. See how when there's two lines, so you have the border from this row and the border from this row, it combines them together. Okay, so that you just have one border. Okay, so it's not, I don't know, it's, if I take it out, that's what it looks like. And if I put it back in, that's what it looks like. Okay, so again, you know, your mileage may vary on to what you prefer, but I kind of like the border collapse myself. All right. Now, another thing I could do for the table display is put a height on it for the rows themselves. So let's do a semicolon there, and let's use a height, and let's maybe do, let's see what 20 looks like, 20 pixel height. Okay, so that gaps them a little more, so I kind of like that. So I'm going to go with that. And then one other thing, when you put, when I did the table and I did the size of it always kind of center aligns the header, okay, for whatever reason. So you could tell it not to do that. So you could do like a text align left or something like that. But another thing I might want to do is maybe center align the individual rows here. So in table display, let's do a text align, and let's do center. All right, so run that, and now everyone is centered. All right, now you kind of thinking, it doesn't look the best in this one up here, but it does look kind of nice in the ones down here. All right. So, and I'll get into that, not probably in this video, probably in the next one. We'll do a little more advanced stuff with CSS, where what if I want to assign something to one table, but not to another? Because the way this is working right now is these settings affect all of the tables. These settings affect all of the table headers, and these settings affect all of the table displays. All right. So that's just what we're gonna work with for right now. All right. Now, I'm going to add one other piece of finishing here, and that also could be found. Let's say if we do table style, um, let's see, yeah, let's do a striped table. And notice on the example here, they have this striped table element that we could use. So it's in table row, and it's using kind of like this function here, where you can assign a different color to every even row or every odd row. So I could go put that again in its own section, and apply that to all of the even numbers. So whatever I put in here is going to be applying to all of the even rows. So maybe I do something like, let's do background color. So the overall background was a light blue, a light gray, I should say. And let's maybe make this one a little more dark. So what was the overall background color? The overall background was that. So let's maybe go with a slightly darker gray. There we go. Maybe that's a little too dark. Let's do. There we go. I like that. Okay, so let's go with that. Okay, so that has our tables looking, well, looking interesting. Let's put it that way. I don't quite like the 80%. Let's do a 90, by the way. Bust that up a little more. Okay, make that a little bigger. Um, or just do the full width. 100. Okay, that seems to match a little better. Okay, so let's say I'm going with that. Now, one other thing I want to do is I kind of forgot about this header up here, right? So you could style that as well. So that would be, again, if you look in the body here, notice the header is in its own H1 section here. So if I want to affect that H1, I could make that a section here. So I could throw H1 and then put in properties here. Oh, I did it again. Put in properties here or attributes that I want to go with that header. So for instance, maybe I want the color of the text to be something else. So maybe I want the text to be blue. And then now notice the text is blue. And then maybe we'll put in, how about a text align center? Right, like so. All right, and maybe that's, that's all I'll do on the header. Okay, so I mean, I could if I wanted to, I don't think it would look good, but hey, you're always welcome to try stuff out. That's kind of the neat point of this editor. I could put a background color if I wanted to do that. I don't really like that in this case, so I'll just get rid of that. All right, and run, and there we go. So let's say for a starting position, this is where we want to go with our cascading style sheet. All right, so let's say that's what I want to do. So now we need to get it into our stuff here. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take out of this editor, I'm going to steal this style here. All right, so steal that whole section, right? And then what we're going to do is let me switch back over to my VM here. And let's say, one of the ways we could do this is we could put it right into the script. I'll tell you what though, but before we even do that, let's go make a file. Um, Text document's fine, and we'll call this css1.css. So again, make sure that's the file extension because that's the extension for a cascading style sheet. And then maybe we'll go in open with notepad, paste that in there. I'm going to get rid of that style close, that style open, get rid of all the blank lines, and save that. Okay, so we do have the style sheet saved as its own file. Okay. Now, again, how do I go about applying it? So the first way that you could go ahead and apply this is to literally put it in the script. Okay, so if I come in somewhere in the script, so I have again in my script here, I've got the parameter, I've got my function which grab the nested groups, and then again, let's say this is like the start of my body. I could literally put it right here. So I could go, create a variable. Let's say I'll just call it $CSS. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's known as a here string, Here, a here string. And what a here string does is it allows you to put multiple lines of text and have PowerShell treat it as a single string, which is what needs to happen here. So to do a here string, you start with an at and an open quote and see how it put in the matching close quote and another at. And then everything in the middle is now that here string. So I'll just paste my cascading style sheet into there. All right, so there's the style sheet present. Right now, I have that in there, and let's say I want to now incorporate that in. So I have that in a variable, and again, I'm just going to collapse this, right? So that way it doesn't use up all that screen real estate. So that's in as that here string. And then in my final convert to HTML is where I would then incorporate it. So on the convert to HTML, I have the body. And then before I do the out file, on here, um, I'm going to use the head parameter, because remember the style sheet goes into the header part. And then for the head, we are going to use that variable. All right, so we're just kind of adding that in. And I should also, since I'm putting in my own header section here, I probably should put in the title as well, because if you remember, we had it did put a title in its own code. So that would remember if I looked at the header, it had its own title there. So I probably just want to make sure that my header has that as well. So we'll just go ahead, paste that in, and then let's maybe call this user report, something like that. Okay, so I could put my own text in there, and then it applies the style sheet, and we can go to town that way. Something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that and then try running here. And this time this will be test 5. Cool. And then let's go look at it. And our style sheet has been applied. Woohoo. It's not the, certainly not the best looking, but hey, your mileage may vary. I just happen to pick, colors that I liked here. Oop, I apologize. I'm collapsing the VM window. I meant to collapse my report a little bit here. All right. So yeah, so there we go. All right. So again, it's not the best looking report in the world, but it's something, right? All right. So again, that's now creativity control. You know how to use a style sheet. You can pick to use it that way. However, I did have the style sheet hanging out as its own file. And remember that if we, again, I had the help open for convert to HTML, notice that there is this CSS URI that I could pull in as well here. Okay, so I could maybe incorporate that. So if I didn't want to load the style sheet as an option here, so let me just take this CSS section and in fact, let me collapse it back down. And I'm just going to delete it. Okay, so it's not there now. And let's get rid of it out of the header. In fact, I don't even really need, well, I'll leave my own header because I still want the title. I'll still leave user report because that potentially allows me to customize it as well. So maybe I could do user report for dollar user, something like that. All right, so I could do something like that, and then go up in my script and add a parameter for a CSS file, right? So when I run the script, I tell it what style sheet I want it to use. And then down in the convert here, so this thing's kind of getting a little big here. So I'm going to do actually, let's go out this way. So let's carriage return. So out files down to its next line. And then inside with convert to HTML, I could use CSS URI and then the variable that'll have that, right? All right. So that way I'm pulling in the style sheet that I want to use. All right. So let's go ahead and run that. Man, this really killed all of my formatting here when I changed the size of my VM. So let's go try that again here. We'll do test6.htm and let's do CSS file. And in this case, it's in C colon stuff css1.css. So let's do that. And let's now go look at test 6. And test 6 has the style sheet applied to it. Perfect. Okay, so that's the other way that you could apply the style sheet. So if you have different style sheets that you use, that's probably the better method to go by. Have a parameter up here that you can add, and then in your final convert to HTML, feed it that information, right? So that way you could very easily run multiple reports, each with different style sheets applied to them. Right? But if you always use the same style sheet, you could also make the here string and put the style sheet right in your script that generates the report, and then just call that variable inside the head section here, or the head parameter. Okay. Now be aware of that with both of these. If you look at the file does not have the style elements in it. So it will go ahead and do that for you automatically. If you're doing the here string, like I did earlier, So if I'm doing the here string, just understand that when you, oh, that's not the paste of it, that when you paste it in, bear with me one sec, I need to go back and copy that. You need to make sure the style sections are included, the style elements are included. All right, bear with me one sec. Okay, so in this case, notice, I have the style closing element and the style opening element. So when you do the here string, this is kind of how you have to add it in. Okay, from my earlier example, if you want to just head back, to that previous part in the video and look at that. Okay, so the style sections have to be there when you're adding it in as the here string. But if you're pulling from a file, in the file, the style and the closing style elements are not there. Okay, so you literally just have the CSS properties themselves. Okay. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up here. We're already at an hour, and I am planning to do a part 3 to this because what I want to style here, what I want to show you guys how to do in a final video here is how do I construct the style sheet to be able to differentiate a style that I want to apply to one table versus another. Like I really don't like the list table right here. It looks like junk. But the styling looks nice on my direct groups table and my nested groups table. So how can I have something that applies to these but doesn't apply to this? Okay, so that's what I want to get into probably in the next video. So be on the lookout for a part 3 coming out on how we're going to do this. All right. So if you like the content, again, please consider liking and subscribing. I will take the script that I have right now and I'll put links up to it, including the style sheet in the description. So I'll have those available for download if anybody wants to go snag those. And I will leave it in the format. Actually, I'll leave both ways in, and I'll let you guys figure out what you want to do. So I'll leave the here string in the script, but I'm not going to call it. So basically the script right now is set up to use the CSS URI. If you wanted to use the here string just in the head section, just put the variable of the here string in there. That's all you got to do. All right. So with that, be on the lookout for a part 3 coming out soon. So with that, have a good one, everybody, and we will catch you in the next video.